Victoria Churchill, New York Post. In your opinion, how does non-citizen voter registration happen? I'm just talking, in Virginia specifically, just last month, the governor and the AG announced that there was 6,000 non-citizens cleared off the voting rolls. But how can we prevent them from registering in the first place?
Well, that's a great question, and folks may have some things I'll address it, but you might.
Well, sure. I mean, that's not what we talked about in South Carolina. One of the biggest issues, the way that happens in almost every state, are the federal registry. The way when you go register for services, Medicare, Medicaid's a great example of that, I believe. And our state, that was a big. People went kind of fired up over that when they heard that they're getting forms when people go register for Medicare, Medicaid, they're getting a registration form. That's true. I mean, that's just the federal policy. They do that. The states are going to have to police that and be sure whenever you get that form back, you're verifying whether those people are citizens or not. I think it's true in North Carolina. I'm sure it's true in Wisconsin, Oklahoma. We will take those. We obviously have to take those forms whenever those registration forms come in. But we do additional deep dive after that and make sure that they can prove documentation of being a citizen. It just comes down to diligence by the state. I mean, it's illegal, as we heard earlier. It's illegal to sign that attestation form and say you're a citizen and register to vote using a form you got when you register for government services. But that didn't stop people. I mean, people do illegal things all the time. So what the state has to do is look at each one of those applications and ferret out whether it's real or not. Because it is true that you have Virginia 6,000, as you mentioned there. If you're in a tight election, that can really make some significant difference. But I think the bigger point we've all tried to make here today is not just that you have people who break the law and register illegally. We have to police that. But we also have to be sure that jurisdictions aren't doing it legally. And so what drives that is when you have a sanctuary city or a city that decides they're going to go register these folks who are not legally in the country legally. And we're trying to close that loophole because that makes it a lot harder for election officials to make a determination. So when you get one of those forms that's falsely attested to and people are illegally registering, if you have jurisdictions in a state or a state itself saying, well, gosh, you can do this, that makes it awfully hard for a voter registration board or a board of voter registration to actually determine whether that's an illegal voter or not. So we're trying, this is, again, it's belts and suspenders approach to make it a lot easier to ferret out whether it's an illegal application.
One of the things we're looking at in Oklahoma is making sure there's no perverse incentive to artificially balloon the rolls. So one of the things we have in Oklahoma that needs to be addressed is there are bonuses the more people you have registered. And so what we realize is that initially I think that the thought was we're going to encourage them to really go out and robustly get all the citizens participating in the election. But it also, it's punitive. They don't get the bonus if they start vetting and removing people who shouldn't be there. So we need to remove those perverse incentives that is actually encouraging a behavior that they can be financially rewarded with so that they can take a deep dive, make sure that everyone who is registered to vote should be voting and not penalize them financially because they're removing people who shouldn't, quite frankly, be on the rolls.
And I think another aspect of this is when you encourage, I mean, some states are talking about, I believe there's, maybe Oregon has already done this, to say everyone's automatically registered to vote. And we have a system, as has been pointed out, where people get their driver's license or Medicare or whatever, and they're registered to vote. And I think oftentimes these non-citizens who are on the rolls didn't get on the rolls because they said, I want to go vote. I know it's illegal, but I want to do it anyway. They're being put on the rolls almost against their will, certainly without their knowledge that it's something bad. And then, of course, they're getting contact from the election boards saying, here's where your precinct is, and here's where the election is. And they're getting mail saying, go vote. So I think the system has encouraged a lot of putting non-citizens on the rolls, not in a, not where you have somebody going, I'm putting a non-citizen on the roll, but systematically, and it's a real problem.